Hi, everyone, and welcome to this special edition of PHAMCAST. I'm Margaret Wallace-Duffy, your host for today and the founder of Preventative Health Awareness Month and Movement, recognized by Health Canada. And I got to tell you, it is February the 4th, and we are in the first week of PHAM 2026, and it's been epic so far. It launched in the nation's capital on Monday. We had a PHAM flag raising, and the momentum is palpable. The energy is like fire. And I got to tell you, this movement that started just 4 years ago is not only picking up steam, but it's creating a life of its own. Different cities are raising PHAM flags. Proclamations are happening in city council chambers, and PHAMbassadors are coming in droves to join the family. And that's what tonight is about, because I am incredibly excited and super proud to announce and welcome actually somebody to the family. You're going to see here on the screen with me, Sam Hutchings, who is the latest PHAMbassador, but he's not just a PHAMbassador. He is actually the lead PHAMbassador for people living with a disability. Now, you know that the Preventative Health Awareness Movement is an all-inclusive campaign, and I mean that. From pregnancy through to palliative care. But here's what I also know as a therapist with 34 years of experience. It is hard enough for everyday people to get access to preventative health. Layer in if you're living with a disability, and it's a completely different ballgame. When I had the privilege of meeting this young man for the first time, I got to give you a little background story. And his dad and I went to high school together. And when I got to finally meet Sam, less than a year ago, hearing his story and seeing his strength and his courage is nothing short of inspirational. He's got a heart of gold. He's an elite athlete in his own right. He's a newlywed, which I love. But when I said to him, Sam, I feel like you need to be the face in PHAM for people living with a disability, he said, I'm in. Sam, without further ado, welcome to PHAMcast.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
You know, I'm really, the first time that I met you, it was so clear to me. I met actually last February, I met you at Giving Back is Good for Your Health Day on PHAM on February the 10th. So it's been almost a year. It was an event at your dad's business, Global Coin Solutions, which is the charity partner to PHAM. We're raising, although we're a grassroots initiative, we're raising funds and giving back to local worthwhile charities. And you were at this special celebration, the 10-year anniversary of Global Coin Solutions. We had a fantastic conversation about life, about health, about your goals and dreams, and just some of the obstacles that you've faced. Can you tell us a little bit about your background? And you were born with cerebral palsy, but I want you to tell your story from your words, because I was intrigued when I listened to you only because of the way that you've not let your disability define you.
Of course. So my life has been nothing if not entertaining, to say the least. It's funny you mentioned the day that we met, because when you approached me and you said, hey, I see that you're in pain, my immediate reaction was, how do you know? And do you know something that I don't? Because historically, part of not letting, cerebral palsy has always been a circumstance for me, but it's never defined who I was. And that I attribute that a lot to my parents, my upbringing. But in saying that, I would often brush aside pain or move forward and not acknowledge it, which until very recently worked pretty well. Mostly because I got really good at hiding the fact that I was in pain all the time. And you were the first person to, especially because we hadn't really met before, you were the first person to come up to me and ever see that I was in pain, which I thought was really interesting. And then you said, hey, I think I can help you. And my immediate reaction was, can you? Can you? And then my dad was like, hey, you should probably hear her out. And then things blossomed from there. And I think that that's really important, because I think a lot of people, especially if they're living with a disability or they're living with an exceptionality or some kind of challenge that they have to overcome, just get used to doing and getting through and figuring out ways around it. But, and I don't want to speak for everybody here, I think my experience was I was really good at figuring ways around it. I was not so good at acknowledging the fact that I was living in pain constantly, in chronic pain all the time.
Mm.
Um, and when you came to me and said, "Hey, I think I can help you. Here are some patches." Again, I was kind of like, really, like, I don't know. Like, I've lived with pain every day for as long as I can remember, in different aspects, in different areas, and pretty much all over my body. And then I put on one of the patches that you gave my dad, who then gave them to me as a birthday present last year. I put on one of the patches, and we went to a hockey game, and hockey arenas are very large, and usually I'm rather mobile, so walking around large areas, depending on the day, can be challenging, or it can go the other way, and it can be pretty easy. But the one thing that always stays constant is, no matter what happens, I'm in pain to some degree that day. And when I put on that first patch, and we went to a hockey rink, and we went and we walked around the rink, it wasn't until the game ended and we were walking out that my dad was like, "Hey, you're walking so well." And then I stopped in the middle of the venue and I said, "I'm not in pain." And he said, "What?" And I said, I'm not in pain." And he said, "When's the last time that happened?" And I said, "I can't remember." And that was the start of it.
You know
And
what?
so I'm very grateful. Very
Well,
grateful.
what a way to start this conversation. And I didn't expect this to go this way. We're having an open, candid conversation, to be honest. We didn't plan out what we were going to say, because I really wanted this to be authentic and organic. But I think I want to raise 2 points here, and we'll dive in and unpack what you said on a couple of levels. The first thing is, and I don't, I'm not living with a disability, but it takes one to know one. And I think when I met you a year ago, when people that know my story, as a young girl and going over 10 years misdiagnosed and gaslit and being told, because I didn't look sick, but I had a disease inside that was wreaking havoc and creating exceptional pain. But you said something that really resonated with me, because it it reflects the way my experience was. You just start to get, because it's so common in you, you just push through, and it's just part of who you are, and you don't acknowledge pain, which isn't always a good thing. So maybe it takes one to know one. And I certainly don't pretend to be living with a disability like you do, like you are, by any means. But I think I saw that in you, because I'm a therapist and I've got 34 years of experience working with people and looking at the body with an open mind and an open heart, and really seeing the person, the whole person. So I think there's part of that, the professional side of me. But there was also the personal side of me that knows what chronic pain and how it can manifest in people, and how you can put on a mask and a face that sometimes I can see through. So I think there was that. I didn't know, this is the first time you told me that. You didn't tell me that before. So that warms my heart that was your experience. So that makes me feel good. And the other piece that I want to say about this is, you made reference to these patches, which we'll get into what that was. But what I really, before we do that and talk about how as a therapist I helped you, I was really taken back by who you are as a man, and how you, as you said, you're not defined by your disability, and you're not defined by this in terms of what you can do in your life, whether it be with your career with athletics. You're, like I said, you just got married, but that doesn't mean that it's been easy. And I am so honored to have you as our lead PHAMbassador to amplify the voice for other people living with a disability. Can you tell me why you said yes when I asked you without hesitation if you would do that? Can you tell me why, Sam, you said you would do that for us?
Of course. So it's two parts. When you first asked me, my immediate reaction was absolutely, I will do whatever you want, 100%. Because I got to know you as a person, and so that part of it was a no-brainer. Figuring out how I can add value was a different beast for me, so to speak. Um, in not being defined by my disability, sometimes I have a tendency, good, bad, or otherwise, to not really, like I said, not really acknowledge pain or anything. But I've chalked my disability up to I just have to do things a little bit differently. Um, I I'm a person that goes through life, and I don't get me wrong, I always know that I do have certain challenges, but I don't often put myself in the disabled box, and I don't know if that's politically correct. I'm so sorry. Where I or people believe that society has to figure out a place for them. I'm a person that believes if you want something bad enough, you figure out where you add value. You say, hey, I can add value specifically in this area. And whether people want to work with you or not is a different story, but at least you figured out a way in. And so the second part of this is even in the announcement yesterday, when that went out, I was floored by the comments, the support. I got so many messages yesterday about all of this. People, um, everybody from like Paralympic athletes, to my family members that were like, "Hey, this looks really cool, but what are you going to be doing? And how are you going to be helping people?" And people were really taken aback by the way the post was structured and the way that I was presented. Um, in that they didn't always know what I was doing, but they knew that through the organization that I was partnered with or involved in, that it was clear that whatever I was doing was dignified. Um, and like I said, I'm a person that loves to talk to people and build relationships, and I'm super outgoing, um, and I think this was the right time for me to join a movement like this. If you had asked me, even I would say 7 years ago, I don't think I would have been secure enough in myself to be able to separate my 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 disability or my circumstance from like the work that I wanted to do, and also not let it define me. I think it works now because I'm in the place where I can say, hey, um, there are resources for people with disabilities, myself included, um, and I can help you, or we can help you to access those resources. And I think the important thing is I can do work like this at this stage of my life and still be able to separate the work that I'm doing from the fact that I am disabled. And I think for me as a person, that's really important. Um, Not only for myself, but because it allows me, like you, I'm also very good at reading people. It allows me, like you, to be able to connect with people on a personal level without it coming off as a sales pitch of any kind, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I thank you for sharing so openly and vulnerably about where you're at. And I'm glad that you got such a wonderful feedback about that announcement we made yesterday, because we are so happy to have you as part of the family. And I, and I love that I'm taking your lead, Sam, about how, and I said this to you, you can be as involved in the preventative health awareness movement as you want or as little as you want. I'm taking your lead. But what I
Yeah.
did know is that there is a big gap in care for people living with disabilities in terms of health care, but especially in preventative health. And so I felt it really important. It's important to me that I try to make this movement as accessible to all people at all stages with all abilities. And so to have someone like you that can share their stories, be real about it, be inspirational, and not have their disability define them, but yet be honest and candid about the struggles and the perhaps judgment that you get. I know you've shared stories with me that, quite frankly, break my heart, that we would be living in a world that would, just because you can look at you and maybe see your braces when you're wearing them and think you're anything different than anyone else just because of your disability, saddens me. And I think that your success you're having, whether it be in your work in the financial services, whether it's been in your work in radio, whether it's been in the work that you've done in athletics, where you went to the Paralympic trials and had success there, it we can do hard things if we're surrounded, as you said, with the right supports, the right people, and the right mindset. And that's what this preventative health movement's about, looking at preventing things from happening. Can I ask you something from a mental health perspective? You're a really, every time I meet you, even when you've been in pain, you're a really cheerful guy. You've got a great energy, and you're a cheerful guy. But I think all of us, life can be hard. And given some of the obstacles that you face, what's some of the inspiration you can give to all of us, whether we're living with a disability or not, to have that kind of mental health outlook? How do you keep your mental health in check?
So I will say that when I was a teenager, when I was a younger adult in my early 20s, mental health is something that I struggle with quite a bit. Um, there is I don't really know if there's a stigma around it, but there definitely is um, issues. It can be any age. This is not specific to my age or younger. Um, I think that society as a whole, um, even when society says, "Okay, yes, you've proven that you can do these things," and I'm a person that went out and got a job in radio and moved 2 provinces away and did all of those things, and then I got a job in finance and I bought a house in Nova Scotia with the help of my parents, and I moved out to Nova Scotia, and then my fiance, she was like, "Hey, you should probably move back to Ontario, where we're from, so that we can get married." And then that's what we did. Um, but through all of that, um, there's a lot of growing, and there's a lot of society has a view of people, and it was a little bit more of a struggle when I was younger, like elementary school age, partly because children don't know any better then. Um, but even now, it depends on people's upbringing. Um, I think people look at me, and I know my ability, and I know what I can do, and I know that I can run and I can walk, and I know that I was an athlete, and I know all of this stuff. But knowing all of that stuff inside in your brain and seeing how you present in the world are a completely, like, the contrast between the two are vastly different. So for a long time, if people looked at me differently, like if people looked at me weird on the street, if people made comments, I would be the first one up to like try and diffuse those comments in not a nice way. But in doing that, all that does sometimes, I've learned, and I guess this comes with as I'm aging, I've learned sometimes walking around with that chip on your shoulder to say, hey, I'm quote unquote normal as everybody else, even though I present a little bit differently. And hey, people are going to say things to me on the street, so I'm going to shoot off my mouth to prove that I am capable of a comeback or whatever the case is. Sometimes that doesn't help. Sometimes all that does is reinforce the bias that people have in their brains. Um, and I can tell you that sometimes when I'm out and about with Ashley, my wife, and something happens, if I was 19 or 20, I would be I would be the one to turn around and say, "Hey, don't do that. Like that's not okay." Now I'm that kind of person that just kind of lets things roll. And Ashley sometimes, depending on how egregious the what the person is saying is, she'll turn around and say, "Hey, don't do that," and I will have to very kindly be like, It's not worth it. Don't worry about it. Let's just continue what we're doing." Um, when I was younger, the body image struggle that I had was very hard, and at times downright vicious. Um, because I looked in the mirror, and I'm talking about like those mirrors above your bathroom sink. I looked in the mirror, and you can't tell when I'm sitting down that I'm disabled. I work from home, and it wasn't until I walked into the office as part of my new team that the people that I work with every day, my coworkers, realized. And because we already had that relationship, it didn't matter. But sometimes when you're walking into a room full of people that don't know you, especially if you're going to apply for jobs or you're going to try and make um, appearances or whatever the case is, sometimes um, the bias takes over.
Yes.
I don't really think all the time that that is inherently people's fault. I think that's just how society is conditioned. And if you're not exposed to people with disabilities, if you're not exposed to different walks of life, then why would you have any other reaction than, oh, that person's different? I want, I either I'm uncomfortable, or if they're young enough, they'll ask questions. Um, if I'm out and about and somebody asks a question about my legs or anything like that, depending on age, like if they're little, I absolutely 100%. If their parents try and wave them off, I say no, it's okay, and I answer those questions, because the only way to change the perception of society is to have awareness
Oh,
and to have that exposure.
oh
And
my,
if people don't have it, right, it's not necessarily their fault that they view other people differently.
Sam, you're raising, really, and it coming from you, it's just so powerful, but it's also, speaks to the type of person you are and the strength that you have, because you're the one facing the judgment or those, that feedback. That's exactly why I wanted to have you as our lead ambassador for a voice for people living with a disability, because you're absolutely right. It is about awareness. This is preventative health awareness movement. And so, in order to be an inclusive movement for all people, having these candid, organic, respectful conversations, but allowing us to do it in a forum where we have an open heart and open mind, where we can learn and grow from one another, is so important. I talk about in PHAM how we break down silos in healthcare, and how both sides of the equation, allopathic medicine and complementary medicine, learn from one another, because we both bring value with one shared vision, to have the everyday person that we have the privilege of treating to be at the center of the care and to empower them to be the CEO of their health. Well, the same is so equally as important when we're dealing with people living with a disability. We really do need to have these open conversations, and no better person than you to be starting to literally put a light on some of these conversations so that we can learn from it, so we can grow from it, so we can be better from it. Because in healthcare, I'm sure you could write a book about some of the discrimination that you've received in the healthcare setting. And that's a place where it shouldn't happen. Doctors and nurses and healthcare professionals, we're all human, and I'm not placing blame. But as you said, there is a societal issue and there are biases. We all have them. And so this is why I felt it was so important, to have these conversations, and why I wanted to start this first week of PHAM 2026 with this conversation, so we can just open up the dialogue and have people, like you said, ask questions, because kids, they don't have the filter, do they? So they ask, they want to know, right?
And it's okay. Like Ashley has a young niece, and she's just at the age where she's starting to realize that I've been around since she was born, but she's at the age where she's just starting to realize, and she's just starting to ask questions. So when I go to put my braces on, or when Ashley goes to help me, sometimes she's like, "Hey, what are those? I want to help." And so so she'll help me put my braces on, and she'll help me do that kind of stuff. And I think that's very important, because the other side of it is, if people aren't exposed, one, they don't know that they're doing anything wrong, and two, as a disabled person, if somebody hasn't been exposed to them or doesn't know how to interact, the interactions with them can be awkward, and or they don't give me or other people the same kind of respect that they would, until I open my mouth. And especially if I'm in job interviews or things like of that nature, as soon as I open my mouth and the interview starts, all of that stuff's out the window. But from the time that I reach the door, if it's an in-person interview, from the time that I reach the door to the time that I go and walk to the seat and sit down, people are already implementing their own biases. And then I don't necessarily think it's fair, but sometimes it's my job to deconstruct the biases in real time as they're interviewing me.
And I mean, as a person that's not living with a disability, I mean, there are biases in the world all the time, but I don't have to think that way. It's stressful enough when you're going for a job interview, let alone have that additional job. Like you said, it's not necessarily fair, that additional job to layer on, just like in healthcare, when you're not feeling well and you're sick and you're vulnerable already, to also have that other bias that comes along, that you have to fight for getting the care that you deserve. These are the conversations that change the future. And I really commend you for, in such an articulate, kind, but passion, not just passion, but what's the word I'm looking, purposeful way of putting things. Like you really, and that's what drew me to you, Sam, and why a year later, I'm saying, I really do want you to be the voice to this, because I think you can help, and already have helped so many people. Just this Monday, when we did the launch of PHAM in our nation's capital, we had an incredible event called Stronger Through Midlife. The energy in the room was palpable. It was community at its best. The energy was high. The vendors were there and engaged, and the people in the room felt supported. And one of the people in the room and one of the vendors was Ability Dogs Canada. And there was a person living with a disability, she's deaf, that was here at the event. And Ability Dogs Canada came up to me and said, could all the speakers please wear this additional device when they're speaking, so that the one person in the room could hear? And of course, we were happy to do it. I think sometimes these are the how we break down silos and barriers by having the conversations. I was happy to do that. I didn't know, first of all, there was somebody in the room that was deaf, but how wonderful with an organization like Ability Dogs. We had a pup in the rooms. The dog's name is Scotia. Incredible. But they, bringing that up and making me aware. Oh, this is how we can make our event even better, more inclusive, fair for everyone. It was fantastic, and that wonderful human that had hearing loss came up to me at the end and thanked me for because she thoroughly enjoyed the day. And I looked at her and I said, no, thank you, because you also taught me something. To
Yeah.
me, that's what FAM's about. And so I immediately told them about you, Sam. And you know this because right away I said, you got to meet our PHAMbassador that's leading and amplifying the voice for people living with a disability. She's like, who's that? Well, his name's Sam Hutchings. And all of a sudden, you two have already connected. What's
Yeah.
that like for you? Are you excited about the opportunity to collaborate and have
Yeah.
opportunities?
So that's the other thing about yesterday that blew me away. I got so many messages from family, from friends, from people that were supportive. But then I had the odd post being like, "This is so great. We'd love to connect with you." And uh, like I said, I'm not a shy person, but the amplification of a platform sometimes, whether I have created it on my own or otherwise, it can be a little daunting. Should people not view it the right way, or should the person, in this case me, not be entirely ready for it? But I think one of the things that was important about yesterday was all of the interaction was positive, and B, even without really doing anything at this time, um, I was already making connections with people. And I have already begun to think of ways that I can use those connections, or the connections that will eventually come, to help people.
Yes.
Um, because I think, and one of the things that I notice being an adult now is, and I this probably has a lot to do with my parents and how they advocated for me when I was younger, but I also think the healthcare system for children with disabilities is better. At a certain age, they just kind of say, "Hey, you're on your own." And so figuring out how to navigate it on my own, and I've been super lucky that I haven't had too many obstacles health-wise in my adult life. But figuring out how to navigate the healthcare system on my own as an adult is completely different, because while the supports are there and offered while you're a child or a parent of a child with a disability, they don't offer them to the adults. And I think that has been the most challenging obstacle. And so when you asked me to do this, immediately my reaction was, hey, I can help in multiple ways, but also if I can build connections with uh, companies with assisted devices, with dogs, if I can do that, then I should. And because I love talking, and I love the interpersonal connection, like I said, all of my connections, all of them have been up to this point, and they will continue to be, are authentic. Um, I am incapable of lying, really, and that goes back to my mom. Like my mom at a very young age being like, "Hey, don't ever do this." Um, so the way that I represent myself, and and the way that you pitched the idea of joining FAM, I realized A, I was put in a position to help people, and B, you wouldn't ask me to do anything that A, I wouldn't align with, and B, people would think was phony. Because if the person that I'm working with and in conjunction beside is one of the most authentic people there is, then by extension, that's your entire brand as well. And so joining FAM and having that piece was very, very important. And the more I got to know you, the more it became a no-brainer. I was just waiting for the right opportunity in the right moment to make an impact.
Wow, thank you. That's humbling to hear. And yeah, this is a grassroots movement that started because of my own story and years of wanting to do exactly what you're doing, just to help others and allow my story to be, a conduit to help others. And so that means a lot to me, Sam. And I'm just so honored to be learning and growing with you. And I know we're going to make impact together. Before we finish up tonight, because you dangled the carrot and talked a little bit about the patches at the beginning, which people are now saying, what is this thing? What helped him? And we're going to do a whole other podcast on it, because I really do think it's something that's based in science that really you taught me a lot. And I was calling Dr. Christy Prouse, who's another founder, because I was just so blown away, and I'm a science geek. So I figured that these photobiomodulation patches that I gave your dad to give to you, because I was curious to see it. I knew the science and red light therapy and harnessing our own internal infrared light and how we can heal our body. But I didn't expect to see the incredible results in such a quick period of time with you, which was really, really incredible to watch. And I continue to see this stem cell patch have such an impact on you. So we're not going to dive into it too much, because we're going to do a whole podcast. If you have me again, another podcast. We'll do a whole podcast just on that, because I think it's worthwhile, and it's helped so many of my patients, myself, and your story though is incredible. And from your perspective, there's something called the X39, which is a photobiomodulation wearable technology that just won a biotech award. There's been millions of dollars of research and years of research put into this product. And as a therapist, I knew that red light therapy has a tremendous amount of benefit. What's so cool about this technology is it's accessible, it's simple, and it harnesses your own infrared light and heat to literally this non-transdermal patch that you wear, peel and stick wellness. You put it on and it allows your infrared light, this non-transdermal patch, which means there's nothing coming in or out of this nanocrystalline structure. But what it does do is takes your infrared light and refracts it back into the body at certain wavelengths of light, back to the mitochondria, where it stimulates something called tricopper peptide, which then activates dormant stem cells. Now, what's a stem cell? A stem cell is a non-differentiated cell that our bodies have to make any type of cell in the body, a brain cell, a bone cell, a muscle cell. However, here's the catch. By the time we're 60, 80 to 90% of those stem cells are dormant. Doesn't mean they're gone. They're just not working. And so the body is intuitive and has incredible ability to heal itself. And that's why young children, when they fall and scrape their leg, they heal overnight. And when you're almost 60 like me, that scrape is there 3 days, 5 days, a week later. Well, harnessing and seeing the impact that this stem cell therapy wearable technology did for you in the first day, let alone the cumulative effect, I don't want to dive in too deep. Can you just very quickly say some of the things you felt almost immediately, Sam? Because I got the text messages and my jaw was dropping.
Um, so and I don't know if this will apply to everyone. I'm guessing it doesn't, but in the first 20 minutes, I noticed that I wasn't in pain. I don't ask my dad how mind blowing that was. Um, because that first day it happened, I put it on, I walked out of the house. By the time we got to the arena to walk around to go watch the hockey game, it was my pain was gone. Um, the other thing that happened is I have issues with sitting sometimes. Like I don't sit properly. And that often compresses my spine. Um, and I stand up or I start moving around 20 minutes after I put these patches on, and all of my I don't know if it's between my muscles or like between my bones, but all of the air that was in there and that was like compressing my spine, I stand up and it all my entire back cracks from my tailbone to the top of the base of my spine where my patches usually typically reside, and then everything's gone. It's like my entire body relaxes and I'm like, okay, I can breathe. On the other side of that, if I don't wear a patch for a couple of days, and I ran out one time, remember I came to see you.
You did. You came to my house and I gave you a
Yeah,
couple that you were
and it
waiting.
was
Yeah.
I was in terrible pain. I put it on as I was leaving your house. We were about 35 minutes away from your house. By the time I got home and I stood up, I was pain free again.
You know, Sam, your story is incredible. And like you said, does this happen for everyone? And we're not making medical claims here, and everybody's different, but the science behind this is sound, and there's a ton of studies. And as I mentioned to you, Dr. Christy Prouse, and of course many other of the researchers in this field, this is the future of medicine, and stem cell therapy and phototherapy and all of these things, regenerative medicine. I'm really looking forward to having a podcast with you and perhaps Dr. Christy Prouse. And I would love to have the founder of these patches on with us, because all I want to do is share so that others, whether you're living with a disability or not, there's so many applications of how this can help with the health and well-being of people. And so hang tight, because we're going to continue that conversation. And lastly, the last kind of teaser I'm going to give, because we're going to do another podcast as well. We were just talking to your beautiful wife, your newly wed wife, Ashley, about one of the things that you're looking forward to doing. And when the timing is right, she used a word today, just before we got on our call here, that said interability couple. That the
Yeah.
two of you are an interability couple, and that you would like, there will be a time where you're going to want to share your experiences as a married couple, her able body and you living with a disability. That really is, I think, so powerful, and we need to hear these conversations. So I look forward to having her on PHAMcast as well to discuss this a little bit.
And I think it's interesting too, because a lot of people don't think about it, but I think it adds an interesting dynamic to our relationship. And there's a little bit more um, there's a little bit more grace involved sometimes, depending on the day. And I think it's interesting, and I also we did a bunch of research prior to trying all of these different things and to having these ideas. And there's podcasts around disability, and there's outlets for people with disability to share their experiences, sure, but there's not very many platforms in which you can hear from both sides.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I think that's really intriguing.
Yeah. Well, I look forward to having FAM elevate both of your voices in that regard too. And I just want to thank you, Sam, for being so open, for giving of your time, for wanting to help others, and for being an inspiration, not because you're living with a disability, but because of the human that you are. And I'm just honored to have you part of our family, as I say, PHAMILY. And I really look forward to seeing where this takes us, because we're both, as I keep saying about FAM, we're building this plane while we fly it. And it's been a fun ride so far, just 4 years in. And I'm really looking forward to see where it takes us. So thanks for joining me this evening.
Thank you so much for having me.
We'll see you soon. And for all of those you are following, please make sure you go to Become the CEO of Your Health on Instagram or on Facebook. Make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel, Preventative Health Awareness Movement, Become the CEO of Your Health. We're over 86 and now climbing healthcare professionals, businesses, actually it's more than that when we count the businesses, that are joining our family and they're putting their hand up and saying, we want to be part of the legacy change in healthcare. And we're doing it one person, one business, one politician, one healthcare professional at a time, because these conversations matter. We are going to change the legacy of healthcare together. So remember, a healthy tomorrow begins with prevention today. And until next time, we'll see you soon.